You spend your life calculating, every word measured, every action filtered through an invisible jury that never stops deliberating. You edit yourself in real time, adjusting your tone, your posture, your opinions to match what you think others want to see. This isn't social awareness. This is imprisonment. The need to be liked, to be approved of, to be validated by people who barely think about you. This need is the chain you wear voluntarily. And the weight of it grows heavier every day, because the more you care what others think, the less you know who you are. Not caring isn't cruelty. It isn't arrogance. It's the refusal to let other people's perceptions govern your existence. It's psychological emancipation. When you were young, you learned that approval equaled safety. A parent's smile meant you were good. A teacher's praise meant you mattered. Social acceptance meant survival. The equation embedded itself deep. Care what they think and you'll be okay. But you're not a child anymore. And the game has changed. The world doesn't reward you for being palatable. It respects those who operate from internal authority, not external permission. Yet you still perform. You still monitor reactions. You still twist yourself into shapes that make others comfortable while you disappear inside your own compromise. This isn't kindness. This is self-erasure. The philosopher Epictetus understood this perfectly. He said that if you surrender your peace to what others think, you give them power over you that they didn't ask for and don't deserve. Your emotional state becomes a puppet controlled by people who don't even know they're holding the strings. There's a particular type of exhaustion that comes from caring too much. It's not physical. It's the fatigue of constant translation, taking what you actually think and converting it into what won't offend, won't alienate, won't disappoint. You rehearse conversations before they happen. You replay them after they end. You analyze every slight shift in tone, every facial expression, searching for evidence of judgment. And when you find it or think you find it, you adjust. You apologize. You shrink. This is how you lose yourself. Slowly, imperceptibly. One small concession at a time. What you call being considerate is often just fear wearing a polite mask. You're not thinking about their feelings. You're managing their perception of you. And in doing so, you hand them authority over your internal world. The psychologist Alfred Adler called this living for others' expectations. He argued that all neurosis stems from the belief that your worth is determined externally. When you accept this belief, you become a performer in a play you didn't write, chasing applause from an audience that will forget you the moment you leave the stage. And they will forget you. Because people are absorbed in their own performances, their own anxieties, their own desperate need to be seen favorably. They're not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. Not caring doesn't mean you become indifferent to everything. It means you become selective about what deserves your emotional investment. You stop giving weight to opinions that come from people who don't live your life, don't know your struggles, and won't bear the consequences of your decisions. There's a distinction that matters. You can respect someone without needing their approval. You can listen without surrendering your judgment. You can be kind without being compliant. The problem is that you've confused boundaries with coldness. You think that if you stop accommodating every expectation, you'll become cruel or selfish. But the opposite is true. When you stop performing for external validation, you become more honest, more present, more capable of genuine connection because you're no longer relating from a place of need. Think about the people you actually respect, not the ones you fear disappointing, but the ones you genuinely admire. They don't seek permission. They don't apologize for occupying space. They move through the world with a quiet certainty that doesn't require your agreement. That quality isn't arrogance, it's self-possession. Nietzsche wrote about what he called the herd instinct, the unconscious drive to conform, to blend in, to avoid standing out in ways that might invite criticism. He saw this as a form of weakness disguised as civility. The herd protects itself by punishing deviation. and you protect yourself by never deviating. But safety bought through self-suppression isn't safety. It's slow suffocation. When you care deeply about what others think, you give them veto power over your life. You can't pursue what you want because it might seem strange. You can't speak what you believe because it might cause friction. You can't rest in your own company because you need constant reassurance that you're acceptable. This is a form of psychological dependency, and like all dependencies, it weakens you. The shift happens when you realize that disapproval is not dangerous. Someone thinking poorly of you doesn't alter your reality. Their judgment is a story they tell themselves, filtered through their own wounds, biases, and limitations. It has nothing to do with your actual worth. You've been taught to treat criticism as truth, to internalize it, to fix yourself based on feedback from people who are just as confused as you are. But most criticism isn't insight, it's projection. People condemn in others what they can't accept in themselves. When you stop taking this personally, something shifts. You begin to see opinions for what they are: noise, background static, data you can consider or discard based on whether it serves you. This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback. It means you filter it through your own discernment rather than absorbing it reflexively. You ask, does this come from someone whose judgment I trust? Does it align with my values? Does it help me grow? Or does it just reinforce someone else's comfort? If the answer is no, you let it pass. You don't argue. You don't defend. You simply continue. Other people's thoughts live entirely outside your control. You can influence them, but you cannot command them. And the moment you try, you lose your freedom. Marcus Aurelius spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him: power, favor, validation. He learned that caring about pleasing everyone meant satisfying no one, least of all himself. So he chose differently. Act according to principle and let others think what they will. There's a specific moment when you understand you've been living someone else's life. It usually comes quietly. You're sitting alone and you realize you can't remember the last time you did something simply because you wanted to. Every choice has been vetted, every action justified, every desire suppressed in favor of what's expected. You've optimized yourself for acceptance, and in the process, you've become unrecognizable to yourself. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about what he called the despair of not willing to be oneself. He described it as a kind of spiritual death, the choice to abandon your own existence in favor of becoming what others need you to be. You think you're being good, responsible, mature, but you're actually committing a form of slow erasure. And the cruelest part? The people you're performing for don't even notice. They accept your performance as reality and move on with their lives. Meanwhile, you're trapped inside a role you never wanted, waiting for permission to stop. Not caring begins with a simple question: what would I do if no one were watching? Not in a reckless way, not in a way that harms others, but in a way that honors what you actually want, instead of what you think you should want. The gap between those two things is where your life is hiding. You've spent years building a version of yourself designed to minimize friction. You've learned which opinions to keep quiet, which ambitions to downplay, which parts of yourself to hide. And now that constructed self feels more real than the one underneath. But it isn't real. It's a defense mechanism, a social adaptation. A mask you've worn so long you've forgotten it's removable. When you stop caring what others think, you're not rejecting connection. You're rejecting the transaction, the unspoken contract that says, I'll be what you need me to be, and in return, you'll approve of me. That contract is exhausting, and it's optional. What replaces it is something quieter: self-respect. Self-respect doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation or applause. It simply knows that your worth isn't up for debate. You stop seeking proof that you matter. Internally, the question is settled. This has nothing to do with arrogance. Arrogance is insecurity wearing a costume. Self-respect is the absence of the need to perform at all. When you operate from this place, people sense it. They might not understand it, but they feel it. You become harder to manipulate. Their disapproval carries no weight. You become harder to impress. Their approval is no longer currency. And strangely, this is when you become more magnetic. Authenticity has gravity. People spend their lives surrounded by performances, including their own. When they encounter someone who isn't performing, it unsettles them. It also fascinates them. Carl Rogers spent decades researching what he called congruence, the alignment between internal experience and external expression. He discovered that congruent people are trusted more deeply. They're not necessarily likable, they're real. And in a world of carefully managed images, reality is rare enough to be compelling. If you want to understand what's coming next, the shift that changes everything, subscribe now. What follows isn't theory, it's the mechanism. The mechanism is simpler than you think. It's also harder than you expect. You practice discomfort. Every time you feel the urge to edit yourself for approval, you pause. You notice the impulse. You name it. And then you do the opposite. Someone asks your opinion on something controversial. Your instinct is to soften it, hedge it, make it palatable. Instead, you say what you actually think, clearly, without apology, without explanation. Someone expects you to attend an event you have no interest in. Your instinct is to fabricate an excuse, to cushion the rejection with elaborate justifications. Instead, you decline, simply, directly. This feels wrong at first. Your nervous system interprets it as danger. You've been conditioned to believe that disappointing others invites catastrophe. So when you stop accommodating, your body reacts as if you're standing at the edge of a cliff. But nothing happens. The catastrophe never comes. People adjust, they move on. And you realize that most of what you feared was imaginary. There's a concept in psychology called extinction. It's what happens when a learned behavior stops being reinforced. A rat presses a lever expecting food. When food stops coming, the rat eventually stops pressing. Your need for approval works the same way. You've been pressing the lever your entire life, performing, accommodating, seeking validation, and it's been reinforced just enough to keep you trying. But when you stop pressing, when you stop performing, the need begins to extinguish itself. At first, the anxiety intensifies. This is called an extinction burst. Your mind panics at the loss of its coping mechanism and amplifies the urge to return to old patterns. You feel the pull to apologize, to over-explain, to repair relationships that don't need repairing. If you can tolerate this phase without retreating, something shifts. The anxiety peaks, then falls, the urge weakens, and you begin to experience what you've been avoiding your entire life, the freedom of not needing anyone's permission to exist. Not caring doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become selective. You invest your emotional energy in people and pursuits that align with your values, and you withdraw it from everything else. This is how you reclaim your life. A joke that isn't funny goes unacknowledged. An opinion you don't share isn't endorsed. An invitation that depletes you is declined. A friendship sustained only by guilt is allowed to fade. Each act is minor. Taken together, they rebuild you. The writer and philosopher Albert Camus understood this. He wrote about what he called living without appeal, existing without constantly seeking justification from some higher authority, whether that's God, society, or the judgment of others. To live without appeal is to accept that your life is yours to define, and no external validation will ever make it more legitimate. You've been waiting for permission to live according to your own terms. Permission isn't coming. It was never going to come. The only way forward is to grant it to yourself. And when you do, when you finally stop caring what others think, you don't lose connection. You lose the illusion of connection. What remains is something more difficult and infinitely more real. Relationships based on mutual recognition, not mutual performance. There's a paradox in all of this. The less you care about being liked, the more respect you command. The less you seek approval, the more people trust your judgment. The less you perform, the more presence you have. This isn't a strategy, it's a byproduct. When you stop managing perceptions, you free up enormous psychological resources. Energy that was spent calculating, anticipating, adjusting, now goes toward clarity, focus, action. You become more effective in every domain. Your work improves, your relationships deepen, your decisions sharpen. None of this happens because you've become callous. It happens because you've stopped fragmenting yourself across 1,000 different versions designed to please 1,000 different audiences. You consolidate, you integrate, you become singular. But there's a cost. There's always a cost. Some people will drift away. The ones who needed you to be small, accommodating, predictable, the ones who related to you through dependence or control. They won't understand the shift. They'll interpret your boundaries as rejection, your clarity as aggression, your self-respect as arrogance. Let them go. Trying to explain yourself to people who benefit from your confusion is a waste of time. They don't want understanding. They want compliance. And the moment you stop complying, they'll reframe you as the problem. This is painful. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you've become selfish, cold, unreasonable. You'll feel the pull to return to old patterns, to smooth things over, to make yourself smaller again just to restore the peace. Resist this. The discomfort is temporary. The freedom is permanent. Nietzsche wrote about what he called the revaluation of values, the moment when you stop accepting inherited beliefs and start constructing your own moral framework. It's a lonely process. The crowd doesn't reward this kind of thinking. They reward conformity, predictability, the willingness to stay in your assigned role. When you step outside that role, you step outside the safety of the herd, and the herd punishes deviation instinctively. They don't do it maliciously. They do it automatically. The same way an immune system attacks foreign cells. You become foreign to them, and they respond accordingly. The question is whether you can tolerate this, whether you can stand alone long enough for the noise to settle. Long enough to discover that solitude isn't loneliness, that independence isn't isolation, that being misunderstood by many matters less than being understood by yourself. This is the threshold, the place where most people turn back. They taste freedom, feel its weight, and decide it's too much. They return to the prison of approval because at least there, they know the rules. At least there, they're not alone. But you're already alone. You've always been alone. The only difference is whether you're alone while pretending to be someone else, or alone while being exactly who you are. The power of not caring reveals itself slowly. It's not a sudden transformation. It's a gradual shedding of weight you didn't realize you were carrying. One day you notice that someone's disapproval doesn't ruin your afternoon. Another day you say what you think without rehearsing it first. Eventually, you realize you've stopped checking your phone for validation. Stopped replaying conversations in your head. Stopped adjusting your personality based on who's in the room. You just exist. And that existence feels lighter than anything you've known. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to everyone. It means you stop being controlled by anyone. The people who matter to you still matter, their opinions still carry weight, but that weight is something you choose to give them, not something they take from you automatically. The difference is consent. You decide who has access to your internal world. You decide whose judgment deserves consideration. You decide when to care and when to let go. There's a line from the Tao Te Ching: care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner. You've been a prisoner for so long that freedom feels dangerous. You keep waiting for someone to tell you it's acceptable to live this way, to assure you that you're not being selfish or unreasonable. That assurance won't come, and you don't need it. What you need is the willingness to disappoint people without collapsing, to be misunderstood without scrambling to correct the narrative, to walk away from situations that diminish you, even when walking away makes you look difficult or ungrateful or cold. You need the courage to be disliked, And once you have that courage, you realize something. Being liked was never the point. The point was always to live a life that belongs to you. To occupy your own existence without apology. Not caring isn't emptiness, it's precision. You learn to distinguish between voices that matter and noise that doesn't, between feedback that sharpens you and criticism that only wants to control you, between people who see you and people who see a version of you they need you to be. This distinction changes everything. Most of what you've been carrying isn't yours. It's borrowed anxiety, inherited expectations, projected insecurities from people who never figured out how to live with themselves, so they demand you live for them instead. When you put it down, when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry, you don't become lighter. You become focused. Everything sharpens: your decisions, your relationships, your sense of what deserves your time and what doesn't. The world doesn't reward this clarity, it punishes it. People will call you cold when you're simply clear. Selfish when you're simply honest. Difficult when you're simply unwilling to pretend anymore. Let them. Their discomfort with your boundaries is not your responsibility. Their need for you to stay small is not your obligation. Their inability to respect your choices is not your problem to solve. You've spent enough time trying to be understood by people who have no interest in understanding you. You've spent enough energy managing reactions that were going to happen regardless of what you did. That era ends when you decide it ends. The power of not caring is not a philosophy. It's a refusal to continue negotiating your existence with people who are never going to grant you permission to live it fully. You don't need their permission. The life is already yours.